Hi everyone, it's Carrie from the Wilderness Center. Thank you for joining me for lesson 4 of the soil unit for your wild classroom. Today's lesson is called Types of Soil. So there are 4 main types of soil that we're going to be learning about today, even there are only 3 in the picture. Those 4 types of soil are really fun to say: sandy, silty, clay, and loam. So each of these 4 types of soil have different amounts of those particle sizes that we talked about back in lesson 3, the sand, the clay, and the silt. So I know what you're thinking. Who cares? Why would this matter? Why would I care how much sand there is in my soil? Why does my soil have to have a name? Well, as it turns out, this stuff is actually very important. If you have ever planted a garden, or maybe someday you will, the type of soil that you plant your plants in is really going to make a difference. We'll talk about that later. Or if you are less of a gardener and more of a baseball player, I have a challenge for you. Do an internet search and see if you can figure out what the correct percentage of those particles is of the infield of a baseball diamond. Who would ever think that soil science makes a difference for baseball? But that infield is very special. It's a very special material, and we can use soil science to figure out what it is. Kind of cool. All right, so let's talk about these soils. First one is a sandy soil. So sandy soil has a lot of sand in it. Makes sense, right? It's very good for drainage. So if you've got a spot that's holding a lot of water, if there was sandy soil, that water might all drain out. But because there's so much sand, there's not a lot of nutrients. So it's not really good for growing plants. This would not be a great soil for your garden. Silty soil might be a better choice for your garden. It's mostly silt. It often has a lot of nutrients, makes a really good farming soil. You can find silty soil oftentimes around bodies of water, like maybe a river, and every time that river floods and it deposits all those things on the side, some of the things that it deposits is silt. So you've got a lot of nutrients that build up around those rivers. So that's silty soil, and remember, you won't really feel the silt like you would feel the sand in a soil. Clay soil, guess what? Has a lot of clay in it. This holds a lot of water. So where sand drains the water out, clay soil does not. These are very tightly packed tiny grains. And so a lot of times they will even use it to line the bottom of a pond or somewhere where they don't want the water to flow out. If you're really into this stuff, you could look up how clay is used in landfills to control pollution. So that's kind of a cool thing too. Remember, clay soils feel slippery to the touch. All right, now you've probably heard of those last 3 words, but maybe you haven't heard of loam or loamy soil. I think it's more fun to say loamy soil because it's a weird word, right? Loam or loamy soil is a mixture of sand, silt, and clay, and it has all the great things that come from each of those 3 particle sizes. So for sand, you wouldn't want soil that was just totally draining all the water, but you don't want it to hold all the water either. You want something in between. Loam. Silt has a lot of nutrients in it. That's good. Clay will hold some water so it doesn't all dry out. So loam or loamy soil makes a really good garden soil, which is pretty exciting if you're a gardener, right? So how do you know what kind you have? Well, you're going to be doing in this lesson 2 different experiments. The first one is really fun. You're going to be doing a soil texture test by hand. So the instructions are in your packet, but during this lesson, or really at any point, you can always email one of us. That our email addresses are in your packet, and ask us questions if you don't quite understand something. So the soil texture test by hand is cool because you get your sample of soil and you get it a little bit moist, maybe not as moist as this kiddo, and you'll run it through some tests. And by figuring out what it does and what it doesn't, it will tell you approximately what your soil type is. Is it sandy, silty, clay, or loam? All right, so you're going to do this one first, and you're going to write down your answer, and then you're going to get to a really complicated part of this whole lesson. So it's okay to ask an adult for help when you get to this math part, unless you're comfortable with the math involved. And we're going to be plotting our soil on a real soil texture triangle. So this is something that scientists would use if they got a sample. They would do something like a shake jar, and they would figure out exactly the name of the soil. Now, when you look at this triangle, they're going to say, Carrie, there's more than 4 types, right? Well, there are. They are combinations of them all. So you will see at the top and the sides and in the middle, you'll see those 4 names that we've talked about, but then there are things like clay loam, sandy clay loam, that are kind of intermediates. So how do we do this thing? All right, here's your worksheet. This is the part that's really hard. You're going to have to go back to your lesson 3 and pull out the numbers, the measurements that you got for your A to D, A to B, B to C, C to D. So that should be, you can bring that from lesson 3 into your lesson 4 worksheet. Then you have to start working on percentages. I think the best idea here would be to talk to an adult, someone who's helping you through all of this stuff, and have them explain to you, if you don't quite get it on your own, how to calculate a percentage. So percentages add up to 100. So if your numbers don't add up to 100, you should probably check your math again. So let's learn how to use this triangle. Let's say our soil is 50% sand, 30% clay or silt, and 20% clay. How do we plot that on that weird triangle thing? Well, the first thing we do is we're going to talk about sand. So you can see my little mouse. On the bottom says percent sand, and there are numbers, and there are lines that kind of line up with those numbers. They're going the same direction. So I would go over to 50% sand, all right? And maybe take a ruler and a light pencil and draw a line right across there, all right? Now the fact that it lines up somewhere over here is okay. I'm not worried about that. I want you to follow the lines that add up to the percent sand along the bottom of your triangle, okay? Then you're gonna say, okay, we had 30% silt. Well, let's do that one. Same triangle. So you've got your line for the sand that's still there. Now we're gonna go 30% silt. Here's our silt, 30%. There's the line that matches up with the same direction as the numbers. Boom. All right, we're good. Okay, now 20% clay. Here's percent clay, the lines that match up with the direction of the numbers. Now all of these 3 lines should cross or intersect in one spot. Guess what? That's your soil type. So if you have soil that's 50% sand, 30% silt, and 20% clay, I hope it's in your garden because you have loam. Awesome. Wow. Yay. Loam is great. Woo. The crowd goes wild. Yay. All right. So hopefully by this point, you can relate to that girl and say, okay, I guess soil is kind of neat. There are lots of different soils you can test. I know I have gone into my forest near my house, and I've gotten soil from there, and I've gotten soil from like a place where they were doing some construction, and compared them both, and they're really different. You can do that too. You can collect multiple samples of soil and see how they're all different. And then you could start guessing which would be better for gardening or for not. So that's all the kind of cool things you can do when you start to understand soil and soil science. I hope that after you finish this module, you think about soil a little bit differently, and you still head outside and are always careful, keep learning things, and have fun. Most important of all. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us at your wild classroom, Soil Science. Have a wonderful time playing in the dirt. I mean soil.